Welcome, radioactive alien ambassadors, hallucinating astronauts, and delusional psychopathic generals to episode 367 of Unearthly Podcast, streaming live on the 19th of August, 2020, and featuring The Ambassadors of Death. Written by David Whitaker and friends, and starring John Pertwee as the Doctor, Carolyn John as Liz Shaw, and Nicholas Courtney as Brigadier Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart. I am Randy Ronson McCulloch, your host for the evening. With me tonight is our technical director, Mad Matt Winchell.
Wasn't half that checklist a usual 70s checklist for Doctor Who?
And our color commentator, Thomas Fireheart.
Kind of surprised Bessie never gets a credit.
Kind of hard.
Because Bessie is always Bessie.
Bill Sylvia, the Man in Black, cannot be here tonight as he is currently in transit from his old home in Connecticut to his new home in Ohio. We wish him luck and hope to see him next week. Okay, so how's everybody's week been?
Oh, not too bad. Of course, winter finally seems to be over down here because I'm pretty much just wearing shorts. It's that friggin' hot and stuffy at the moment.
It's actually starting to finally mellow out around here. It's been like 60s and 70s for the last couple of days.
At night, mind you, it's still getting into the 80s, early 90s during the daytime, at least around here.
Not here.
Now,
you need to come an hour north.
Well, mind you, it also could be the fact that we get the afternoon sun glaring right into our apartment.
That might hurt you more so, yes. Like, because I'd already seen this episode today, I had extra time, so I actually went out and mowed the other half of the lawn today.
Oh, no, I watched this episode while Lotro was down for maintenance. I'm like, oh, I'd normally be playing Lotro right now while Aaron's doing this, but I'll watch the episode instead.
Mind you, for those folks at home that haven't seen my lawn, that lawn is so big it takes roughly an hour to an hour and a half to mow. That's why we split in half.
I am so glad I live in an apartment and don't have to deal with mowing the lawn, because I always hated mowing the lawn.
My father does the first half of the lawn and he starts getting heart palpitations.
Oof.
Yeah.
He just starts, everybody just, after that first half of the lawn, just starts sweating bullets.
I'd probably take about 5 steps with the lawnmower and keel over dead, you know.
Oddly enough, the backyard has actually been treating me very well. It was pretty windless today, but even then I wasn't barely cracking a sweat until I was coming back in the house.
Yeah, my thing, like, usually my dad will be like, oh, like, it's midday sun in Australia. Yeah, it's fine. Go out and mow. And I'm like, fuck you. I'm waiting until the afternoon.
So, I had something annoying happen this weekend. So, as you might have known, last month I paid money for a mask. Had it shipped. Took 3 weeks to ship here. I've worn it exactly 3 times, and Saturday would have been my 4th, except it broke.
Oh,
jeez.
While I was at the grocery store, one of the filtration pieces on there fell off the mask, which means it is no longer valid as a mask, as it's a mask with a hole in the front. So that was kind of disappointing, because now I'm back to square one mask-wise. And I can't wear a normal mask because I stopped breathing. And oh dear God, that is a giant spider in my house. No, I'm serious. This is some arachnophobia-like material.
You need to find a rolled up newspaper fast.
Yeah, hold the podcast. I'll be right back.
Pardon us, everybody. Randy's gone off to go get the flamethrower. He'll return to us as soon as the fires have died down. I've not seen arachnophobia, but I've seen enough gifts to know what's about to happen. Light her up.
Mm.
Oh, I saw this weird thing dangling in my room today. Looked a little bit closer, I realized it's a dust bunny holding onto a cobweb that somehow came off of the corner of my ceiling. At first I was like, what the hell is this spider doing here? Why is it dangling like this? And it's like, wait, no. I need some more light here. Grab my cell phone and flick it on. Oh, it's not a spider thing at all. Why are the cobwebs doing this? Whatever. And just start swiping it all up and trying to get rid of it.
I don't know if I got it or not. It fell behind Aaron's bed.
No.
Dun, dun, dun.
And it was about the size of a silver dollar.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, the daddy longlegs can get that. I hope it's only a daddy longlegs.
This was not a daddy longlegs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be keeping a light on over there and keeping an eye over that shit.
Yeah. I'm watching as this thing is crawling behind the lamp going, oh my God.
Does this thing need a hip bar? It almost needs a hip bar.
Reminds me of those wolf spiders. I'm like, no!
Need a big, solid, flat object, and it needs to die today. Well, with other frustrations, I found out Sunday morning that I was rejected from my job that I did an interview for.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, they gave the usual fucking bullshit generic email that I keep getting. Literally, the only company that ever told me a good, solid reason why they weren't going to pick me for a job was fucking Shopco. A company that's now basically dead here.
Basically dead everywhere.
It's still got a few spots in the States, but yeah, in this general area, though, it's basically gone now. But literally, their reason...
all that was left was optical.
The only reason Shopco did not pick me up for a job was because they had accidentally overhired when they bought out a pharmacy in town. So I was low enough on the chopping block in the terms of when interviews were done that I got cut off.
Now it wonders how many rejection letters they have to send.
I don't know, but the Shopco at least had the balls enough to actually have the manager call me and tell me why I wasn't being picked. So to that, I give Shopco kudos on at least that much. But yeah, everyone else has just been generic emails, and they've been giving me generic emails for 10 years. On the plus side of things, I got stuck in System Shock for a while, but I finally figured my way through it. And while checking where I am in a walkthrough recently, I found out I'm about 2/3 or more of the way through the game. So if I'm lucky, maybe by this time next week, I might be very close to being done with that, and I can probably comment on it, if not next week, then the week after. As long as things continue to go smoothly. Oh, and also in a bit of revenge because of the whole not getting that job thing, I've decided to pick up streaming afternoons and have been prolonging how long my streams go now.
Okay.
I've been going up to like 2 hours on a stream now. I'm on solo. Might go longer, we'll see.
All right. Anyway, on tonight's show, we have birthdays and we have Big Finish releases. Again, there's not a lot of other news because production for Doctor Who has basically ground to a standstill.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a little geek talk. Then we've got our episode summary. A new little section I'm going to call Ron's Soapbox, where I'm going to talk a little bit about the moral in this episode.
Okay.
And then we're going to do our review, our final thoughts, and our ratings. So let's start with birthdays. We've got 2 birthdays. One was on Sunday and one was yesterday. Sunday's birthday was that of director Rachel Talalay, who was very big during the 12th Doctor era. She turned 62.
Definitely one of our highly recommended directors of recent year.
Yeah, she seemed to
Hmm.
direct most of the good stuff.
Yeah, and
She
this is
had a couple of mediocre ones, but when she was hot, she was hot.
yeah, and this is coming from a
Hmm.
woman whose first directorial experience was a really mediocre Friday the 13th movie. Not her
And then
fault. It was just badly written.
yeah, and that seems to be the problem with the mediocre Doctor Who episodes she had, is that they were just badly written.
Yeah,
She directed them
Yeah.
well.
yeah, she's a good director. She's just has to deal with what she's got.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And then on the 18th, yesterday, saw the birthday of composer John Debney, who composed the music for the 1966 or 1996 movie, not 66, 96.
Gonna say there's a difference there, my sir.
Oh yes. And say what you will about that movie, the music wasn't bad.
Oh yeah, the music
Hmm.
on the Doctor Who special from the 90s was spot on.
He turned 64. So happy birthday to Rachel and John.
Yep.
Moving to the bottom of the list for Big Finish releases, we see a release for the new Sixth Doctor line, which is the Sixth Doctor and Perry Volume 1. If you recall, Big Finish is now moving away from what used to be the main range or monthly range into basically just doing Doctor specials. So there's going to be basically sets for each Doctor when they put them out.
Mhm.
This is going to be the first one of the Sixth Doctor and Perry.
I'm noticing one of the villains in the background, and it looks a lot like an enemy type from Serious Sam. Not exact, but a lot like it.
Also out is Torchwood Red Base. And finally, the free episode this week is Torchwood Aliens Among Us, Part 1. That is Part 1 of that particular Torchwood bit, so it's probably only the first half hour to an hour episode. And that's it for our news. Moving right down into Geek Talk.
Yep. Thomas has a few bits.
Yeah. So yeah, I honestly almost probably could have had this in time for last week, but in a way, given we had like 5 bits of Geek Talk last week, I think it was probably better off that I hadn't. But yeah, like pretty much over the past week, I finally got around to finishing Fully Cooley, which it's weird. In hindsight, it was kind of bizarre to me knowing that this is only like a 6 episode OVA series, that it had taken me this long, especially since this first came out when I was like 9 or 10 initially, at least in Japan anyway.
Wait, how old are you? I'm
So, like,
sorry, I remember this coming out like either it was when I was in high school or I was in college. I forget which.
like I would have been like, this came out at least when this originally aired in Japan.
Ah, shoot. Just a moment. I leave something open. I don't know why I left open. That's causing an issue.
Yeah, it's like it's weird that it took me this long.
Sorry, I
get
missed
around
some of
to it.
that. When did this come out?
From what I could see, it aired between 2000 and 2001.
Okay, 2001. God, that was like 2 years away from me graduating high school.
I mean, to be fair, like that might have, what I read might have been going by like the
That might have been the Japanese
Japanese.
release, so maybe
Yeah,
it didn't
where
come
it's a
out for like
dub.
another 2 or 3 years
Yeah.
stateside still.
Yeah. Either way, it's kind of because I feel like I've tried watching it before and watched one episode and then just got distracted by other stuff. But yeah, it's interesting. It holds up for the most part. There are some things where it's like, um, you know, panty shots of high schoolers and shit, and it's just like, nah.
Well,
And
you
they
got
try
you
to,
guys remember that Japan's a bit different about that kind of thing,
yeah,
especially when it's aimed
and
at a specific age group. They're like, that's okay as long as it's for that age group.
yeah, and there's like um, they seem to keep implying a possible relationship between the main character, who's at best 12, and the main woman of this show, who is at least 20. or So it's like,
Yeah, she's at least somewhere in her 20s, and I
that's a
remember
bit
him being
weird.
at least a teenager of some kind, and that is a
Yeah,
little bit
like,
odd.
yeah, they very much talk about still being in elementary school, so it's like, this is a bit this
See,
is
I
a
don't
bit
remember it being
wonky.
elementary school, but then again, it's been a
Um,
while.
yeah, at the very least, the dub refers to it as that. So, or at
Hmm.
least refers to people still being in it. It might just be friends of his still are or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd have to double check that dialogue.
According
Yeah.
to the sources, he's 12.
Okay.
I think the thing is, she like the character lies about her age, and she could pass for a teenager, but they think it's like someone else figures she's 20 or something like that. But yeah, either way, it's like it's a bit eh. But otherwise, it's an interesting show. It's so bizarre to me that there's ultimately not really a plot. Like there is, but there isn't. It's just kind of,
There's sort of a plot. It's just kind of a just crazy events happen kind of plot.
yeah. Like when it got to the last episode and ended, I was just like, oh, well, that happened. Like not in a bad way, but it was just like, oh, okay. Um, the thing that I learned earlier this week, I think, or maybe last week, that blew my mind was that there's actually 2 sequel series to this,
Yeah, there was
which
2
I was
sequel series
completely
that came out, I
unaware of.
want to say about 5 years ago, and they were made roughly around the same time.
Not
Mm.
5 years ago. Try 2.
It's only 2 years ago. I thought it was a little
Yeah, they
further
both
back
came
than
out.
that.
They both came out in 2018.
So, yeah, and they were both 6 episodes as well, each. So there's like, so yeah, it's kind of funny in that way that there are like 18 episodes total of this, which is kind of quaint when you consider some anime that came out around the same time the first series did had like more than that total in like a season.
Well, that
Well,
depends upon the show too.
yeah, it does, because you got to remember, um, basically Japanese television, at least back in the day, I'm not sure how it did now, used to work around 13 episode quarter seasons.
Yeah, that
Um,
still happens now.
and shows could basically be signed on for 1 or 2 quarter seasons before having to worry about getting renewed. Unless they were a very popular show, in which case they're just like, it'll be done when it's done. And those would be shows like Naruto, Detective Conan, Inuyasha.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which has got a sequel show now.
Well, technically, so does Naruto.
Well, yeah.
But
at least it's the same creator coming back for Inuyasha.
Whereas other ones would tend to have usually around a 26 episode run if it was a double, and then there was the 13 ones. And then you had OAVs, which weren't bothered with a TV, which were usually 12 or 6 episodes. The original FLCL was an OAV, so it only had a 6 episode run. From what I'm reading, the spin-off series were actually television, but they might have been like streaming television. So
yeah, it was recent enough that it probably was like streaming television of some kind. Because that's roughly the same amount of episodes there are of the entire Castlevania series now.
It's just kind of funny. In a way, I'm kind of surprised they didn't. Well, I guess even if they were going to do anything for what would be the 20th anniversary this year, they, COVID probably put a damper on that.
it looks like it's quite possible that the spin-off series were actually commissioned by Adult Swim.
Oh.
So they might have done payment for the to the production companies to make them.
Hmm.
They forwarded the big bucks to go, here, make it again.
And I could be wrong. I'm just not seeing a list for a Japanese distributor. So that's the only reason I'm not certain about that. But yeah, both of those are 6 episodes. Both of those aired on the Toonami block. So, you know, the thing is, when FLCL came out, it had another nickname by most of the people that I knew that would talk about it. And that was WTF.
See, that was never the nickname I heard it by. I just remember being in my animation class in college, and they had just experienced some episodes for the first time. But they were also, as much as they enjoyed the crazy randomness of it, they were also very much of the mindset of, let's not talk about this in front of our teachers who literally just hate anime because they hate that it's popular.
I will say one thing that actually kind of threw me off at first was also the fact that there is no intro to this OVA series. I mean, like, maybe that's a thing for more OVAs and I've just not been exposed to enough to notice, but...
OVAs tend to have a looser format, so it can be, but others do have openings.
Because I just remember thinking... Like, I figured for the first episode, it was like, okay, maybe we just want to use this time to establish things or establish the mood, whatever, and then go on. Then it's like, oh no, just the theme that I know from this anime, from this OVA series, is just the outro.
Yeah, that happens sometimes.
Which is interesting. It might make it one of the more notable outros by virtue of that.
The original Bubblegum Crisis was the same way. It didn't really have an opening theme. And its outro was a different rock song every time.
Yeah, come to think of it, I think the only OVA that I can think of that had an intro and outro was Record of Low Swore.
Yeah, that was one I was thinking of that actually had a set intro.
I know Tenchi Mio.
And both songs were freaking beautiful, by the way.
Yeah, and Tenchi OAV also had an intro.
Yeah. Which I almost thought, oh, it looks like there might be a Philly Killy thing happening. And then I realized, oh, wait, I'm on the wiki page for Tenchi Mio.
Shame.
Anyway, I think we've talked enough on this one.
Yep.
Sure. So, Fall Guys. You've played it. I've watched a lot of people play it. I can't afford it. It's $30. I have no money.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you the main reason I have it is because while I could not get it on PC anyway, because I just kind of doubt that my laptop could handle something like that, even though it's not exactly insanely graphic intensive or anything. It is going free this month on PS Plus on the PS4, so I just snapped it up then because like, oh sweet, cool. This is like an interesting game in that it, you know, like the whole thing is just kind of a bunch of elimination rounds and like whoever wins at the end wins. Some of the team games are a pain in the ass.
Yeah, especially if your team just doesn't want to play, and it's just like, come on, guys.
Yeah, or you just happen to end up on a team. Like, the joke at the moment is that if you end up on the yellow team, there's like a massive chance you're.
Oh my god, yeah, I've been noticing that a lot. Actually, I have also noticed at the same time though that Dahi Denogula has defied that rule.
Oh, I've had plenty of games where I've managed to make it to the final round and have been on yellow team the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
It was just that I lucked out, and yellow team was actually decent that time. I've had games where like I got put with like blue or red a lot, and then ended up losing a lot as well. So it's all luck based to a point. Um, I've yet to win once, which kind of still sucks. I mean, I haven't been.
Let me just say you're in good company there. Asmongold was pissed off. He enjoyed his time playing it, but he's pissed off he never could get to the end. He almost grabbed the crown on that one last level, but he was literally like half a second too late, and someone else jumped before he could.
Oh yeah, like I watched a streamer like, oh god, it would have been this morning I think, or like late last night, where the only reason they won that particular, like, I think you're assuming you're thinking of Full Mountain, the one where
Yeah.
you've got to jump at the crown, yeah. Um, someone jumped at it before him, but forgot to grab it.
Oh yeah, I've seen also one
so
where
they-
a bunch of guys jumped for it, but they dove, and when you dive, you can't do the grab. At least you couldn't at the time.
Yeah. So it was just kind of funny that like it was pure luck that the other person in front of him forgot to grab it, so he was able to win. So that was funny. Yeah, it's very fun. It can be frustrating when you lose constantly, or at least you're like me, where I'm at the point now where I have a decent shot at making it to the finals, but I still just haven't won yet. And the funniest thing to me was watching people play it before I got it, and realizing that the door is like, wow, this DoorDash game looks really familiar, and then it clicked very quickly. Oh, Takeshi's Castle has a
Yep.
game very much like this.
Yeah,
Which,
it's a
I
lot.
mean,
It's
I
a
was
lot of like Takeshi's Castle like mini games, and they're all meant to be elimination rounds, so that by the end of the game you go down to roughly down 10 people,
yeah, like
and
it
you
was
start
either
with
one
I
of
think
those,
60.
yeah, 60 or thereabouts. Sometimes people usually get like connection errors, so it'll end up being more like 50 something.
Pending, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like it'll be interesting to see what they do. They've already added one new sort of final round now, since it came out. It'll be interesting to see how it develops going forward. But yeah, like I would definitely say that people should give it a shot. If you have it on, like, if you have a PS4, you won't have to pay for it this month, so
Oh well, as long as you're subscribed,
that
yeah.
works out. Yeah, so long as you got a PS Plus subscription, yeah. I mean, you'd need one to play it anyway, I'd assume. But yeah, whereas
I will know I don't have.
if you can't, yeah, like if you can't afford it on Steam now, I'd wait for a sale and get it.
It
'Cause
that being
it
said,
is
I'm
definitely worth
extremely
it.
like low budget. This is my problem. I'm sure a lot of
Mm,
people can afford it because it's like $30 on Steam.
yeah. So like,
I'm just
especially,
extremely poor, and I just recently
mm,
paid off some of my student loan debt. So
oh yeah, like I've definitely seen a few streamers at least being like if you can afford it, cool. If you can't, that's fine. I mean, especially the current climate, it's like,
hmm
$30 might be a bit much even for even for being cheaper than normal. But yeah, like I would definitely say, uh, if like, or hell, at least check it out and like watch streamers playing it and that, because that can be quite cathartic and fun.
I think there's been like at least 4 or 5 channels that I watched that have been playing it already.
Mm.
Sorry, I zoned out, guys, when you brought up Takeshi's Castle.
Oh.
Just remembering the American dub of that.
Oh
What are
yeah,
these people running away from? They're not. They're running towards. Yeah.
yeah. I've definitely, at least in my own head, a couple of times, either while watching streamers do it, Especially because one streamer here from Australia has like a little setup where they can do an instant replay thing. I would make MXC Impact replay jokes.
Let's go.
All right. Anything else to say on that?
No,
Looks like a fun game. I do want, but I just have to wait until I have money.
All right. That means we are up to the summary, which is me.
All right. Stopwatch is ready, so whenever you are.
Just a second. Let me take a little drink here so my throat doesn't dry out in the middle of this.
Still scanning for spiders.
Oh, there better not be a frickin' spider in my pink lemonade. That would just be...
No, I'm saying you're scanning the room for spiders, because Lord knows where that thing went.
I think it's trying to heal under the bed. Because I know I at least whacked it a couple of times with my crock.
Time to get the spray cans and lighters ready.
Oh, I'm very sure Erin would just love me for torching all of her art pictures that she keeps under her bed with a ghetto fireball.
Well, would she prefer that, or would she prefer to be bitten by a psychotic spider?
Spiders, yeah.
Spiders.
All right, let's get this started.
Alrighty. 3, 2, 1, go.
All right, so the show starts out with a astronaut making contact with a Mars probe ship that's on its way back from Mars. He's on the recovery craft, supposed to unload the astronauts and bring them back to Earth from the laughably futuristic British space program. The weird part about this is nobody's heard from these astronauts since about 24 hours after their landing on Mars. But yet they're here. They're getting picked up. The astronaut is in the docking umbilical on the way to the other ship when he sees something, hears something, and screams. And then, of course, PlanetSide loses contact with him. We cut then to the doctor who's putting around his lab, and after some shenanigans, gets caught up in watching the television footage of this, partially because the Brigadier is on location at the space... I don't want to say space station. What do you call it? The
command center?
The command center. Thank you. I don't know where my brain is. Anyway.
Took me a moment too.
As they're on there, they suddenly receive this weird screeching signal from the craft. The doctor spaces for a moment, says he recognizes it, and basically takes off for the command center. He dodges past security, gets in, and the Brigadier grudgingly lets him on. The doctor pretty much, first of all, runs into problems. First from the base commander, who is rather put off by the doctor's rather aggressive approach. But after the doctor's prediction that the sound would be repeated happens, complies. Then he receives trouble from their head of their computer center, who first of all tries to block the doctor from having access to the computer, and then later pulls a gun on him. He is stopped by the Brigadier, who quickly takes Liz hostage and escapes. The doctor then tries to start decoding this message, but quickly finds out that the computers have been sabotaged. After raising enough stink, they're given an interview with, oh God, what was his name? This is what I get for watching it early. they get they basically get a phone call from politician Sir James Quinlan, who introduces them to General Carrington, who is actually behind all this. General Carrington tells them that the astronauts have gotten a strange form of radiation. The ship lands, is hijacked. The doctor hijacks it back, but the transport is empty. Carrington has the astronauts stashed, but before the doctor and them can see them, they are kidnapped from out of Carrington's control by a man whom we later find out is called Regan. Regan winds up kidnapping Liz to help, basically to have her help him take care of the astronauts. The doctor manages to decode the message enough to figure that there is this weird translation device that'll help them translate the signal into speech or vice versa. He starts working, but apparently the computer operator already made one. He gave it to Regan, and Regan starts sending the astronauts out killing people. The doctor realizes that these are not the astronauts because there's no way they could survive this radiation. He believes the astronauts are still up in orbit, and they start prepping another launch shuttle to go up there. They start, and suddenly Quinlan starts blocking him. After trying to lean on first the computer operator, after all, he was only acting on orders, the computer operator comes back with a bomb trying to kill the doctor and winds up blowing up himself. When they start leaning on Quinlan, he's murdered. Anybody seeing a pattern here? Eventually, the doctor does manage to get up in a spaceship, which he has to pilot himself. But even then, his trip up is sabotaged. They manage to recover. The doctor goes up, manages to dock with the orbiting spaceship, and they're quickly overwhelmed by a large alien vessel, which comes down, in which the doctor finds the other astronauts in a hallucinating state, thinking that they're in decontamination on Earth. He is also contacted by aliens asking why haven't they returned their ambassadors. And if they don't return the ambassadors, they're going to blow up the Earth. That's a wonderful political statement there. The doctor convinces them to send him back down, where at that point, Carrington has basically taken everything over because he is behind all of this, because it's his plan to use the ambassadors to prove that there are hostile aliens and wants them to nuke the bad guys. His subordinate Regan, however, is more concerned with trying to get a working communication device to convince the aliens to rob a local bank, because that's what you do. He kidnaps the doctor out of decontamination, even though his orders were to kill the doctor, and basically tasks the doctor to make a fully operating translation device. The doctor does, but also piggybacks onto it a Morse code transmitter to transmit their location to Unit, who comes in and raids them and liberates the doctor and Liz. They in turn lay assault to the base using the ambassadors, and to stop Carrington just before he's about to make a huge broadcast around the world showing them that these are hostile aliens. They arrest Carrington, and the doctor sends the ambassadors back to their people. End of story.
7 minutes, 27 seconds.
It's a 7-part episode.
Yeah.
All right. So this is the part where I'm going to get up on a little soapbox for a minute and talk about Carrington's motivation or his self-justification. Several times during the last 3-4 episodes, he refers to what he's doing as his moral duty.
Yeah.
This is a very similar statement to another one I've heard in other things, saying it's for the greater good.
For the greater good. Shut up!
These are the biggest loads of bullshit that you can ever have, because all you're trying to go down to is saying that the ends justify the means, which they don't. There's a difference between Star Trek II Spock's "the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one," or the few or the one, because at that point, he's the one, he's willing to make that change.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're basically justifying nothing but killing innocent people to make your point, no, at that point you've gone, you're off the rails. Somebody that tended to use the greater good a lot is Dumbledore from Harry Potter. And if you think about that, a lot of what he did was morally questionably gray. He basically groomed Harry Potter to be a sacrificial soldier on the battlefield so that he would go open-armed up against Voldemort and die. Harry never really had a say about this, hence the grooming. And he also made a few other questionable decisions, and most of that was all for the greater good. Doesn't necessarily mean that he was morally right in doing this. Again, you know, if you are a captain and you have to send somebody into a suicide mission to save the ship, that is something that a soldier knows that they have signed on for. That is a possibility that may happen.
Mm-hmm.
When you're doing the same thing to an innocent shopkeeper, then you're a murderer.
Yep.
And so never go into that thinking that it's your moral duty or it's your greater good to do bad to do good. It's just never a good thing. Okay, I'm going to get off my soapbox now. It's just one of those statements that just tends to grind my gears. All right.
I have some other things I might mention about that, my feelings on that too, but that'll come later.
All right, review. All right, let's get into the review. Thomas, what did you like about this episode?
You know, something I wasn't expecting to be like more of a subtle background element, but I still appreciated it being there, was the fact that while they don't address it much outside of like the first 5 to 10 minutes of like what happened in the last serial, we generally see a shift, at least for this story, of the Brigadier wanting to figure out what this shit is, what's going on, before he makes any kind of, okay, let's blow this shit up kind of a call. Like, he's actually being fairly reasonable compared to this other guy who's like, no, fuck it, just bomb it.
Well, that's the thing. The Silurians, at the end of the Silurians, had proven themselves to be a threat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
While there was a faction that was okay, that faction was murdered, and the ones that were there were warmongers that basically wanted to wipe out humanity so they could take the planet back. The Doctor still thought there was, you know...
Doctor thought there was hope, but that's a long hill climb.
Whereas the Brigadier was like, that's a threat. We need to blow it up. These ambassadors the aliens had never proven themselves to be a threat other than people using them to commit murders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they really didn't have any choice in the matters, or so it seems.
Also, the fact that Carrington was rather obviously unhinged.
Yeah.
So that may be the difference. The line may be somewhere in there.
Yeah. But, like, generally, like, coming right off of the Silurians, it was nice to have one where it's like, he's actually being cautious and like, well, we don't know that they're a threat yet in this particular case, so I'm going to hold off.
Yeah, my major bitch about the Silurians last week was him doing it behind the Doctor's back.
Yeah.
That was kind of a dick move. All right, Matt, how about you? What did you like?
Oh, what did I like? I like that the Doctor got to do a lot of interesting things he doesn't usually get to do, even in the Third Doctor era. He gets to do a lot of the normal Doctor things, but you don't get to see him usually using Earth spaceships a lot. And you also don't get to see him going through the weird translation equations, at least very briefly, enough that you can get the idea and that he's learning something about what's going on. Also, this is still back in the era where he can kind of remember some things, but he isn't a master of like knowing everything in the universe like he can get at some points in more recent Who. There's just a lot of nice development with him in this particular story, I feel.
All right. So what I liked is the director of the space program, Ralph Cormish. It was nice to see a character who wasn't uptight and unwilling to listen to the Doctor. I mean, he was at first, but that's because the Doctor was acting like a bit of an asshole when he popped in.
Admittedly, even after that, the Brigadier kind of went, Doctor, he is kind of the guy who's running his show. He's like, oh.
Yeah. And then he apologized and did that. But by the, halfway through the episode, he's trusting what the Doctor's saying more than his own people. They're actually lighthearted and kind of joking about it. And that was good to see, rather than the uptight, this will ruin my career guy that seemed to be a staple of the Second Doctor era.
Yeah. And not to mention, if it had just been that again, then we would have had 3 serials in a row with that, because the Silurians had it, and Inferno has it. Because there's the guy in charge of the drilling that doesn't want it to stop no matter what. So 3 in a row would have been a bit much.
I get the feeling I know who the red herring is here.
And it was nice to see a director that was actually open-minded, rational, and eventually on our side. All right, so let's talk about what we didn't like about the episode. Thomas?
Like, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but the fact that this one guy manages to get away with all of this sabotage so easily, to me is just like, what? Like, every time you think, okay, they'll up the security. No. It's just like, God, it gets to a point where it's like, what did you expect? Of course they were going to sabotage it. Why didn't you think ahead?
Well,
to be fair, it wasn't just one guy. He was basically paying off a whole bunch of guys to work under him.
It wasn't just paying off. The guy was a military general. And he had months, if not a year or more, to place people in strategic locations within the space program. So, they thought they had plugged a leak, but, they'd only plugged one of basically what was a sieve.
Yeah, like that one, like the one guy who's like in it for the money thing, just getting away with his money. Like, some it's like, okay, fine, but like the further it goes along, I'm like, wouldn't the Brigadier have just sent out a bunch more unit people to watch this? And sometimes they get around that because there's like the scene where like one unit soldier gets taken out, but it's still just like, this is awfully easy for him to just get all this stuff done. And then it like, I wouldn't say like it's not making unit look as incompetent as like they would eventually,
I'm going to talk about that in a second. Because I actually think it does. But I will explain why in a moment.
Hmm.
Do you have anything more to say, or do you just want to wait till get to my point?
Yeah, I'll hold off.
Or do you want me to go ahead of you, Matt, since mine is directly related to Thomas?
Might as well, since it's been brought up.
Okay, yeah, this episode, or this serial, makes UNIT looks like a bunch of chumps. It really does. They are outsmarted in every single thing they do. None of the UNIT soldiers, unless your name is Brigadier Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart, can hit shit. And anytime you have a UNIT soldier come up against these guys, they're quickly overpowered and knocked out.
To be fair, Benton didn't fail this episode either.
Yeah, when Benton's group came in, that was fine. Any nameless UNIT officer was worse than a red shirt from Star Trek.
Yeah.
It's like the entire UNIT cast, other than the named officers, are basically sending in their CVs to be stormtroopers in Star Wars. Because they're that goonish. And this is supposed to be a trained elite military force.
Yeah.
And they're just... I'm watching the gunfight, like, within the... like, in episode 1. And I'm like... UNIT guys are getting hit left and right. And all the UNIT guys their shots are ricocheting off walls. I'm like, oh, Jesus. They suck. And then the Brigadier comes in and basically wins the entire battle for them.
To be fair, they thought they were up against street thugs. It turns out when they captured the one guy, he was definitely military trained. So there's something that's still a little bit off, but you would still think that they would quickly realize, oh wait, these guys are better than what we think they were. We need to use better tactics quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But then they just kept running forward, and half of them getting shut down.
What's the funny thing about that first firefight is that it basically makes it look like the Brigadier has plot armor because he gets like shot at and it hits the wall like around him, but never actually hits it.
And meanwhile, he's like at like a 90% accuracy with his pistol. I'm like, yeah.
And the fact that he's actually doing this with a pistol where everyone else has got machine guns, and he's just...
Except none of them were using them in auto fire. All of the UNIT guys had assault rifles and were using them as single-shot rifles. Rewatch the scene if you don't believe me. I'm sitting here going, what the hell? You could spray that corridor. It was you have better arms because all the bad guys just had pistols.
Yep, for the most part, as far as I remember.
All of your guys have assault rifles. All of them have pistols.
You didn't even need good tactics. You just needed to learn to pepper spray the hall.
And none of them could hit shit, and all of them were using single shot. I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah, like there's even that bit in like I think it's the final episode where like the only reason they win a shootout is because the two they're up against ran out of ammo.
Yes, and it's the same thing. They're still single shooting. It's like nobody showed them where the auto click was on the gun. I'm like, Jesus. I think this would later get fixed in later episodes. Like, later serials.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, we got to do a military thing, but we don't really have anybody to train these guys to do military, so we're going to fake it.
Of course, it wouldn't surprise... It would be funny to learn that, like, it's a direct result of footage like that and someone who had military training just being like, okay, yeah, no, I need to get in contact with these people and make them do it right.
Actually, it comes to my mind now that I wonder if maybe this episode was a bit neutered. Because
Mm.
they always had problems during the 70s of possibly running a little too risque for being the air quotes family show. So I'm wondering if maybe they were forced to like do only one shots with the rifles, and that would also explain why we only get one very quick glimpse at one of the ambassadors.
Maybe. Might also be that, like, I think we talked last week about the fact that this was. I think it wasn't necessarily rushed, but like just generally ran into production issues. I mean, this did have like 5 people writing it essentially.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if maybe it's multiple things of both they got slapped for being too violent and had to cut things back, and that caused a lot of different things all at once too.
Mm.
Just a thought that I've been kind of pondering on too a little bit. That kind of ties into what's been talked about here.
All right, so Matt, did you have a?
Oh, outside of that one, yes. My other problem with this episode is that poor Liz Shaw spends half the story being just shoved in a room with a couple of the villains, and she doesn't really get to do much.
And she escapes for about 10 minutes before she's recaptured.
Yeah, and that's after her first 20 minutes of being captured. So,
yeah. I pretty much. The funny thing is, I think my favorite and least favorite scene are probably both going to involve Liz.
not surprised, because again, it's not like she doesn't do anything at all there, but she is caught in that limbo room for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
And while she does occasionally do important things, she's also half the time just scenery with everything else.
It's obvious why the actress wanted to quit.
It's obvious why she wanted to be better written in, but then why there were some issues.
Yeah, it's just obvious that they didn't know what to do with her, so they kept writing her out.
Yeah. I think she even has said that initially she wanted to take time off because she was pregnant, and she was basically given the sack because they didn't know how to write for like a solo companion that was supposed to be not necessarily on par with the Doctor intelligently, but like someone closer to his equal than anyone else anyway. And that's
Yeah, they didn't know how to write for an intelligent partner that didn't have to ask all of the questions. And to add on top of that, she was going to be pregnant, and how do you shoot around that? Yeah, there was a lot of complications there, sadly.
Mm-hmm. All right. So let's go to favorite scenes. Thomas.
So there's a bit, I forget exactly what episode it's in, but it's closer to the end. Where the sort of like criminal dude that's doing most of the sneaking around just like grabs her and puts like a gun to her chin, and she's not flinching. She's just like not like in I feel like a lot of other companions this would be like the screaming woman bit of
some
like,
sort of panic,
oh shit, oh shit. Yeah. Whereas this is like she's just like, yeah, okay, fucking do it. Like, you know.
Technically, she is part of a military force, so she's probably had a little bit of that training too.
You're talking Regan?
I think so, yeah.
The guy that's basically Carrington's main underling?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Regan.
Yeah, like the bit where he has a gun to her chin and is just like threatening her, and she's just like not going for it at all. It's just like, hey, more of this, please. She's like actually just like, nah, okay, fucking do it, I dare you. Kind of thing.
Yeah, she gets badass ranks every now and again.
Yeah. Every once in a while, Liz gets the go ahead, do it moment.
All right, Matt, how about you? Your favorite scene?
It's definitely an interesting scene. My complaint is that it does feel like it was chopped down, but just to add to the effect of everything else going on with the ambassadors of death, there's that really creepy moment where one of them actually pulls off the helmet and you see what looks very much like a radiation victim.
And that's the point that I think Liz freaks out.
Yeah, she does
Yeah.
freak out at that because they cornered her in there for a few moments too, as the guy is taking off his helmet. Like they're trying to communicate with her, I think, but it's instead scaring
Yeah.
her even more.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I feel like it feels like it looks like a really good effect and it seems like a really interesting idea, but at the same time, I think the reason why they pulled away from that effect really quickly is not because it was bad, but because I feel like they felt it was getting too scary for the kids, which is definitely possible.
Mm.
Because you barely get more than I want to say you get like at most a second or two clip of that guy's face.
Yeah, pretty much. And every other time, it's like you're seeing it
They're always in
through
helmets.
that glass window.
Yeah.
Okay, so my favorite is kind of a weird choice. And that is, I think it's either in the first or second episode where they get Recovery 7, they load it up on the convoy and start off.
I think that's episode 2.
And they start off and they have this jaunty little music going.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoy that episode because you've got to remember, at this time, for British sci-fi, their chief competition over at ITC was the Jerry Anderson show UFO. And that whole scene is very reminiscent of something you would see from UFO. It was kind of like the BBC going, oh yeah, they can do it, we can do it too. Only their music isn't quite as good as what you would have gotten on UFO, which was very 60s. I don't know if any of you have ever seen UFO.
I can't say that I have for sure.
It took place in the far-off future of 1980. And basically, it involved this strategic organization that was protecting the Earth from alien invasions, and they had frickin' space bases and moon bases and all this other stuff. But the entire opening had this great 60s-ish opening theme.
Oh, so Mic Jack, only that the plot was actually properly there and not ripped out for dubbing.
Later, stuff from the moon base from UFO would be spun off into its own show, which I think was called Space 1999.
I've heard of that, definitely. I think I've seen a few clips.
Yeah, Space 19. Yeah, that was the other Gary Anderson show. Anyway, after the stream, I'll like find the opening to UFO to share with you guys, just to show you how freaking like 60s it is. Anyway, but no, just that whole thing, I'm like, it just felt like a Jerry Anderson UFO. So I'm just like,
oh, that
cool.
That kind of also reminds me of another fun moment of just seeing Bessie being ridden through like downtown London. They had like a little traffic scene. It was nice to see.
All right, least favorite scene.
Okay.
Thomas.
I'm not like, I think it's supposed to be maybe like a dam thing of some kind, but like they're running over a bridge, sort of thing. And at first, I'm just like, I'm kind of cheering her on in that, and then Liz just stops dead to turn around and look, and then keeps running, and then does it again, and I'm like, what are you doing?
I think that's just bad editing is what's mostly happening there. It happens.
Because it's just like she stops and turns around, and it's like they're not that far behind you. Just keep running, damn it! Like,
yeah, that was my least favorite scene too, because it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think the editors just really flubbed up what they were supposed to be doing there, which is showing her running whilst looking over her shoulder, not just having her stopped.
Yeah.
It was also kind of a lame end of episode.
It was also a lame cliffhanger where she suddenly is taking a dive.
Yep. All right. Matt, how about you? What was your least favorite?
Least favorite scene. Oh gosh, I'm trying to think. Least favorite scene. Actually, I think this was a cliffhanger too. The moment where the doctor walks into that office and the guy's basically dead on his desk, and one of the ambassadors is in the room. There's always like a noise and stuff that follows the ambassadors. Like the doctor literally walked past not more than a few inches away from one. He didn't hear this thing.
Yeah, that was definitely like, yeah, as soon as you say that, I was like, yeah, that was probably one that I was gonna bring up as well. It's just like, how could the doctor not hear that?
How could he not hear it? How could he completely miss hitting the thing with the door or noticing that he hit something unusual with the door, which he practically did? There's just so many questions of him just literally walking into that scene. And it's like, wait, dude, really?
Yeah, and the funny thing is if that sound effect wasn't there, it wouldn't be as big a problem.
Yeah, but except that the sound effect happens every time they walk near a room.
Yeah.
So it's obviously meant to be at least some sort of call out to the fact that they're there.
Yeah.
All right. So my least favorite scene after the one said is also another end of episode cliffhanger. And that is the one where the computer scientist sets off the bomb in the room with the doctor. Because I'm sorry, if you set off a briefcase full of C4 in a closed room, the guy standing 6 feet from you is not going to get off with a mere scratch on his face.
Well, I can't remember if that actually was a cliffhanger, but yeah, that felt like there's a lot less damage than there should have been if that was the particular explosive.
If you looked at it, you when you opened the box and you looked at it, you saw it said H explosive on there, and what it looked like was C4 because it looked like plastic explosive.
Mm-hmm. I think they said it was plastic explosive at least.
Yeah, and that would have been C4.
Yeah, and if that entire thing was actually aligned with the stuff, it would have taken half the room.
Yeah, it should have taken half the room.
Yeah, not to mention the fact
the aftermath we saw, it barely took corner of a table.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, like the top of the table is missing, but otherwise it's intact.
Yeah, the table would be gone. Most of the computers in that room would be gone. If the doctor survived, he would have been moaning on the ground with a fallen computer on top of him.
Yeah, with the computer taking most of the shrapnel blast from him.
Yeah, and that would have been if he'd managed to duck behind a computer at the last second.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot that doesn't quite add up with that explosion.
Yep.
Yeah. To the
And
point that it's
the guy would have been tiny bits.
Oh yeah, that guy would have been a smear. That would have been beyond their budget.
Because that was point blank.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like, it's one of those things where, like, if the idea was it was supposed to shoot something out into their face, like shrapnel or something, like, okay, I could get that.
But with the particular type of explosive and the kind of damage it was supposed to do, they underplayed it big time.
Yeah, they did. And that was like, he's supposed to get 15 minutes to escape. I'm like, dude, you could have walked down for a coffee. It was just something that they led up as an assassination that suddenly makes no sense. If all the briefcase is going to do is blow up the table it's on.
Mm-hmm. And maybe the guy that happens to be right next to it.
All right. So, final thoughts. Thomas.
While I don't think I necessarily enjoyed this as much as the Silurians, I still think this was a fairly good serial. Again, it's one of those things where it definitely didn't feel like it dragged for all the issues we had. I mean, hell, they even sort of not so much rush the conclusion, but the conclusion is more of a, well, here's some leftover stuff, but I don't want to be in. But I've done all I've got to do. I'm pissing off. Um, so so we just end it so we don't end up with like an 8-parter or something. Um, yeah, like I would. Um, I don't necessarily know where I would place this among. I guess if I had to choose, I'd say it's might be the weakest of this particular season of the like what 4 stories total that there are technically. Um, but that's still not saying that it's bad. It's just that the others are so strong. Um, so it's still at least in good company. At least I'm glad to know that I didn't hate any of the ones from John Pertwee's first season. So yeah, I would definitely say to check this out, but like last week, it's a 7-parter, so it's like over 2.5 hours long. So maybe don't try to watch it all in one go like we probably all did.
I
Maybe
did, and I was.
reset.
I'll get to mine in just a moment. But yeah, go ahead.
Or were you done, Thomas?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, Matt.
I saw this all in one scene, and I was thrilled from moment one to end. I was completely gripped by this one, which was unusual because I do remember there were slow bits, and yes, there are definitely slow bits in here, a little bit here and there, but I generally really liked this one as much, if not more, than last week's. Um, I think the enemies, air quotes, the enemies, the ambassadors, are an interesting concept. I think the concept of why they're here is a unique one that we haven't seen, although they does bring up similar character types. It doesn't completely play them the normal way we expect them to be played, thankfully. And while there are some critiques to be had here, I think the general plot itself is definitely not a bad one. If anything, I think the budget and maybe plot slash video editing at the last minute might have caused some harm to this story. But if it was to be like redone, I guarantee you this would be out of the park.
Anything else, Matt?
I think that's a general gist of my feelings on it.
All right. I too watched this in one sitting, and I too was pretty much involved throughout all of it. It was only, I think, around episode 5, it slowed down a bit for me. That I felt I could. I took the time to pull up our timeline for tonight's episode and do some stuff. But I was still listening to it and paying attention, and I didn't feel lost at all. So, I enjoy it. It does have some minor flaws, but I mean, really, most of it's nitpicks.
Yeah. Like, we will tweak this scene or tweak that scene, or maybe if they could have gotten away with the editing, maybe that scene would have been better.
Mm-hmm. All in all, I thoroughly enjoyed this. I was happy. I liked, like I said, the light trip. It was obviously that they were trying to compete with, like, UFO. There was trying to compete a little bit with James Bond.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, Pertwee is freaking Time Lord Bond.
Mm-hmm. It was obvious, and both were obvious in there. So I was enjoying both things of them trying to compete with the big boys, as it were. And all in all, I was, thoroughly enjoying it. The direction seemed to be good.
Mm-hmm.
Except for them single shooting guns, but that might have also been,
that might have been
sort of expensive. Yeah.
Yeah, it might have been. Yeah, there might have been some sort of money management or some sort of editorial thing that was a problem with that scene. So I can give the show a little bit of a slide on that.
Yeah. Yeah. All in all, I enjoyed it. Let's rate it. Thomas, you are
Thomas,
first.
yeah, you might be the low one tonight. So that's what you gotta say.
Uh,
You gave the Silurians
yeah,
a 5.
there's I feel like there's just enough that bugs me that it'll have to be knocked down to a 4.5.
Aw.
All
It
right.
could, with potential to change on a rewatch or something.
Matt.
Sure. As far as I'm concerned, the first season of John Pertwee is what made me an instant fan of his, and this is part of it. 5.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 5 too, because there's not enough for me to bitch about.
There's minor complaints, but I really cannot find it in me to hate this one. This one kept me enthralled, despite even the slow points.
All right, and so until we hear from Bill, that will average out to a 4.8.
We'll see what Bill has to say when he catches up next week, hopefully. Cross your fingers, folks.
That will put this one in at number 24 out of 354 things reviewed. It is on par with School Reunion, The Hand of Fear, The Armageddon Factor, Dark Water, Death in Heaven, The Robots of Death, Tooth and Claw, The Macra Terror, Time Heist, The Empty Child, Dr. Dances, Genesis of the Daleks, Dalek, and Pyramids of Mars. It is better than Day of the Doctor, which I don't agree with, Kinda, The Stolen Earth, Journey's End, and it is not as good as The Silurians, which I'm not sure I agree with, The Unearthly Child minus the Tribe of Gum, and The Pirate Planet.
Yeah, like I said, we'll have to see what Bill says. He might actually tie it with the Silurians. We'll see.
So 25 out of 354. That is all we have to say for now about the Ambassadors of Death. Matt.
All right, I'll take us out tonight. So if you've been enjoying the show, do check out our YouTube, our Twitch, and our Twitter, and the Facebook and Patreon, all of which you can see right here. Unearthly Podcast for most of this, but you can also find us on Patreon at an Unearthly Podcast. And you can find us at Twitter at Unearthly Pod. Comment down below if you liked the show, what you liked about the show, if you think if you agree with our opinions, or if you really think we're out of touch for some reason. It's Classic Who. Everyone's opinion is welcome. And again, if you wish to help out the show, there's always Patreon if you wish to donate.
All right. So next week, that'll do it for Pertwee's first season. We've also done all of Pertwee's second season as part of our master mega set. So we will move on to his third season. That would be season 9, where we only have one missing episode from that, and that would be The Mutants. Written by Bob Baker and Dave Martin, and starring John Pertwee as the Doctor and Katie Manning as Joe Grant. See you next week.
I'm checking really quick if I can find an image. Okay. I think I've seen this one before. Okay, we'll see. Yep. Good night.